here we are. Here we are in the middle of a global pandemic. Here we are in the middle of a national uprising against centuries of racial injustice. Here we are in the middle of the worst crisis the arts field has experienced in its history. And I want to talk to you today about what comes next. I want to talk to you about my personal vision for the future, about what it looks like when we are all coming together and moving toward collective liberation. I want so badly to share that with you today, and I can't. I can't share it with you because I can't see it. I'm completely at a loss as to what comes next. My imagination is failing me. And this is not good news. This is not good news for somebody like me. I rely wholly and completely on my imagination. I always have. Not only that, but our ancestors tell us undeniably that it is our imagination that will take us to collective liberation. If you don't believe me, you can ask Octavia Butler. And if you don't believe Octavia Butler, I can't really help you. But I also just want to lift up the author Adrienne Maree Brown in her book, Emergent Strategy. She tells us we are living now inside the imagination of people who thought economic disparity and environmental destruction were acceptable costs for their power. It is our right and our responsibility to write ourselves into the future. Our right and our responsibility. And here I am without the capacity to dream. My journey for this talk started several weeks ago, and I was completely sure that it would be an intellectual exercise, an intellectual process. And I would be delivering to you this thing that came from my head. And it has been not that. It has been the opposite of that. It has been this deeply personal journey, completely unexpected. And so I'm sitting here delivering to you a talk that is coming from my heart. And this journey, it turns out, begins not several weeks ago. It turns out it began a year ago. Almost a year to the day, I was here in my office at Baltimore Center Stage, and I was in the middle of my first show of my first season, the incredible musical Miss You Like Hell by Chiara Alegria Huris and Aaron McKeown. And I was so excited as a Latina to share this show with my new community here in Baltimore. And the icing on the cake was the moment I found out that Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor would be coming to my theater to see the show. I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. I called my whole family. And about a week before she was due to see the show, I had to go home to Texas, where my father, who had been battling cancer for several years, had taken a turn for the worse. So I went home and I spent some time with my mom and my dad. My dad was in the hospital, and I made the really hard decision to come back to Baltimore just for that one show to meet Justice Sotomayor. And I said to my dad, Dad, Sonia Sotomayor is coming to the show. I'm going to go to Baltimore tonight. I'll be back tomorrow. And as I was leaving the hospital, the doctors and me and my mom came to the really hard conclusion that they were going to move my dad into hospice that night. So I knew that by the time that I got home, that I would be actively preparing for my father's death. So I came back to Baltimore. I met the justice in the lobby. We went upstairs to take some pictures. We were both wearing black. The photographer, as he was taking our pictures, said, "You're both wearing black." And Justice Sotomayor looks at me, looks at the photographer, and says, "It's a Latina thing." I died. My heart was so full. This is such a huge deal. I came back downstairs to my office. I had a phone meeting with a colleague. We had a disagreement. I lost my temper, which is very rare for me. And I hung up the phone and I fell apart. I fell apart right here. I sank to my knees. I was sobbing uncontrollably. I was completely undone. This moment, the height of my professional career, was on this collision course with the lowest point of my personal life. And I had this complete sort of fissure, I guess, inside my heart. So I did what we do. I did what women do, what people of color do, what women of color do, especially in leadership positions. I picked myself up and I wrapped myself up in my armor. I doubled down on my armor. I put my head down and I went back into battle. Went home to San Antonio. My father died about a week after I got back. I was devastated. I am still devastated. And I spent the first season of my tenure here in Baltimore wrapped up in my armor, deflecting criticism, welcoming support, enduring racism, compartmentalizing everything. And I focused on fixing the broken systems that me and my colleagues had inherited. But I was so focused on the past, so focused on correcting for what had happened, I never stopped to really consider what would come next. So by the time we get to March of 2020 and all the theaters start shutting down, and then by the time we get to the summer of 2020, and there are riots in the streets, and Dear White American Theater releases their demands, I was caught without my imagination. I was caught without my capacity to write myself into the future. So it turns out that imagination is not the silver bullet. It turns out, at least for me, that there is a missing ingredient. It sounds so simple, but for me, in order to activate or reactivate my imagination, which is the path forward to collective liberation, I needed this other thing that I didn't understand that I had lost or covered up. And that is vulnerability. In order to be present in my work, in our work, in order to build empathy and understanding, vulnerability must be present. It must be operating. And it turns out that the thing that I had built up to protect myself was the thing that was keeping me from fully inhabiting myself. Vulnerability and imagination, that to me is my revelation, my discovery, my aha in developing this talk. So it seems appropriate to be sharing that with you from this spot, talking to you in this way as I begin my own process of divesting from my armor. I made the decision in the process of filming this to start peeling back the layers that keep me from my whole heart and that keep me from connecting with you and with my work and with my community. So that's where I'm coming to you from today. I still can't speak to the future of the American theater. I still don't have a clue what it looks like. But in this understanding, in this resolution and commitment to being emotionally present and vulnerable while pursuing my imagination and artistry and creativity, this, I think I just got one step closer. Thank you.